The following podcast is brought to you by Magic Mind, a little elixir that boosts your energy, memory, and mood without a boatload of caffeine and healthy ingredients. Go to the link in the description to support the channel and use Broken Silicon 20 to get 20% off your first order. And it is also brought to you by CDKoffer.com. Use offer code Broken Silicon for 25% off Windows codes and Die Shrink for 3% off everything on the website. All right, let's get to the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom. And, you know, I am a Rottweiler chained to a post that's about to break, chomping at the bit. Which actually, I think chomping at the bit is a reference to horses. I don't think you put bits in dogs' mouths, typically. But either way, whatever metaphor you want, I'm excited to get into this one. I have way more to say about some of the recent news that's dropped than I really expected that I would. I'm glad we delayed this episode. But let me introduce my co-host.
I will introduce myself. I'm Dan.
Before I break this chain and start biting at the news, how are you doing today, Dan?
I'm pretty good, I suppose. How about you?
I'm good. I mean, I don't know. My sleep's been all over the place for the past month, and I feel like I'm finally starting to get back into that rhythm where I get up at 10 a.m., which a lot of people go, oh, that's not so early. And it's like, yes, but anyone who supports Moore's Law Z on Patreon and frequents the Discord can tell that I clearly work until about 8 or 9 or even 11 p.m. usually. The problem was I was still working that late and then going to bed at 5 and then still insisting. Yeah. I would not let myself sleep past noon. I was like, no, I will not be one of those people that just gets up at 4. And I think I'm finally starting to find my center again, Dan.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Another good thing is this reader mail here from Freeman, which you guys can submit if you support us on Patreon. Freeman235 writes in, he says, "Hey Dan, hey Tom, on the most recent Broken Silicon, I commented and suggested to make Brian Heemskirk an anniversary guest. I don't want to get ahead of myself, so if you wouldn't consider inviting Brian on a few more times, you can cut this question off here. But anyways, if you do consider it, I have a few things to add about this idea. I feel like there have been too many great guests on Broken Silicon recently. What a terrible thing, I know. Well, we'll have to do something about that. We'll have to get some crappy guests then. But also, Tom, you've been saying, I want to have you on the show sometime again. Too many times to your recent guests. Broken Silicon is this perfect mating of familiar voices and ideas, and new input from every expert and corner in the industry. And I wouldn't want one aspect to overweigh the other. So if you do not only bring Brian on multiple times, but other great guests from the past, it appears maybe it would make sense it appears that maybe there's potentially too many new and old guests to have on, considering the 2-week cadence for guest episodes. In that case, would you guys mind combining a Dan/news episode every once in a while with future and current recurring guests like Brian, Steve from Hardware Unboxed, Tim, Lars, Michael from NX Gamer? So people with a similar generalized view on hardware industry as you guys would join you two every so often as a 3-man show on news and a few specialized questions. Then leave the new guests and experts for the guest episodes. That's not a bad idea, and that is something I would consider if we got to a point where we had like a dedicated producer for the show, or like we had Gerard on full time and he became a full producer, which is conceivable because that's what it would take. The problem is I'm my own secretary. I am finding guests, responding to sponsors, managing the website, all of this myself. And so I'm being honest with you guys. There's a certain degree where it's just like, oh, Steve is open to coming on Hardware Unboxed next month. Good. I wipe the sweat off my brow and go, I don't need to worry about finding a second guest that month. I've got him and NX Gamer or something. See, that's the problem, is if you say, if Steve's going to come on a news episode, then it's like, now I got to scramble to find another guest for the next week.
Yeah.
And it's not that I wouldn't consider doing this. And I've thought about Brian, for example, like if Dan got hit by a car fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you think about that. We could have Brian on to be a surrogate Dan. I think he'd be a good candidate as a person to come on and handle the news with me or something. And there's been people I've had in mind for that. That's something we may try. But a 3-person episode just seems like we do podcasts, live streams, and videos. Most sites only do one of those.
Mhm.
And I don't know that we have the time to organize putting a bunch of guests into mega episodes. Although we did do the Silicon Lottery one that kind of did that, but
Yeah. I could also see it being useful just as if there's like a shorter news week or something, having a truncated news episode followed by a shorter interview. Because I also don't know if you necessarily would want to turn this into a 3.5, 4 hour long podcast every once in a while.
right. Like the comparison point would be like Sacred Symbols, where it was just Chris Ragon and Colin Moriarty, and they typically had 2 to 3 hour episodes. And they brought in Dustin, their producer, as a third person, and I think the show's very good. But now it is like usually 4 hours long. But they don't do videos, and they have people to handle the emails for them. I do not.
Mm-hmm.
I would say right now, you might say Broken Silicon is a 300 watt podcast. I don't think I'm ready for a 450 watt podcast. It just get too hot.
What about 8 or 900?
Oh, well, that makes complete sense. I'm sure that's coming out.
Oh, good.
But you did mention NX Gamer. He should be the next guest, by the way, to talk about what's going on with, all of the recent hardware releases, but also, like FSR's implementation into consoles and PlayStation Plus versus Game Pass. So look forward to that as well. You mentioned him, so shout out to that as well. But yeah, so I did want to acknowledge this question, though, because it is something that I'm always playing around with the idea of changing formats. It's just right now, I think we're pretty happy with what we're doing, and we're happy that the guests have been so good repeatedly recently. All right, then, let us get into the corrections and omissions. Spanton Neo writes in, he says, in the die shrink released March 21st, you failed to mention and comment on the fact that this die shrink was the most important one for a long time. It was die shrink number 69. And there will not be another one that is this meme-worthy for, I would say, another 351 episodes, or maybe 6,900 episodes. Anyway, great thoughts on RSR in that episode. I really recommend that to anyone who's missed it, but no one said nice.
No, that's unfortunate.
I thought, we honestly entirely forgot what we were recording because we were it was one of those late at night ones on a specific subject, and it's just, right when we finished, I was like, oh, we didn't make a 69 joke. I guess we'll just have to
live with that.
Live with not being teenage mentality.
Yes.
No offense. We did consider saying this. We're not saying we're above making those jokes by any means. QH Freddy writes in, something to keep in mind with GDDR5 is that early GDDR5 was far slower than late GDDR5. And in terms of capacity, there were big changes as well in the standard. Early Fermi used only around, I think, 3 to 4 gigabit per second, while Maxwell and Kepler used 5 to 7 gigabit per second. Pascal got up to 8 to 9 gigabit per second. So while it spanned quite a large amount of time on the market, it had an almost threefold increase in performance in that time. And I believe he's referencing me and you talking about if people are surprised some version of Lovelace, or certainly RDNA 4, gets GDDR7, that you need to understand that they use silicon to make RAM chips. If the node stagnates, also stagnating will be RAM speed. And he's saying, but there was a threefold increase in GDDR5. All right. Yes, QH Freddy, but GDDR6 started at 12 to 14 gigabit per second, and that came out in 2018. By next year, I think we're up to 27. So we are doubling performance in about 5 years, whereas GDDR5 seemed to take over a decade to get to triple. So I don't know. I think that there's no way around it. We got GDDR6X 2 years after Turing came out, whereas GDDR5X came out. I mean, I think the 4870, 3870 were the first graphics cards. It's not even fair me to get GDDR5. So that took like 7 years or something for GDDR5X. There's no way around it. The accelerating of node progress again is for sure accelerated RAM. It is outpacing GDDR5, even if GDDR5 maybe was the most improvement we've had in one standard.
Yeah, and like the second generation of cards to come out already had what 21 gigabit per second, correct? Or am I
If you
misremembering?
include GDR6X, which I think you should.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's been a pretty big increase relatively fast. Also, I'm getting older, so 5 years feels like less time. But
That's true. And honestly, it feels like GDR5 was around for 2 decades and GDR6 has been around for a month.
yes.
Based on how time is perceived by us getting older. But yeah, so those are the corrections. I guess let us then get into just the first story. Let us tarry no further. Story number 1, Nvidia reveals Hopper at GTC. And here's the write-up. On March 22nd, Nvidia announced their first 5nm, actually crossed that out, 4nm graphics card to succeed A100. The Hopper-based A100 has the following specs: an 814mm squared 4nm monolithic die, an SXM5 or PCIe Gen 5 interface form factors that both come with a 5120-bit 80GB HBM3 memory interface, or, again, depending on if it's SXM5 or PCIe Gen 5 interface, 132 or 114 SMs, 15,872 or 14,592 FP32 cores, 8,448 or 7,296 in 32 cores, 528 or 456 texture units, and up to 4,000 teraflops of FP8, up to 2,000 teraflops of FP16, and up to 1,000 teraflops of TF32, and up to 60 teraflops of FP32 or FP64, which is absolutely crazy for that one. And the power consumption is 700 or 350 watts. A few things are immediately noteworthy after this announcement when it comes to the gaming-oriented cards to follow. A100 was up to 400 watts versus the 350 watt RTX 3090. And if you think about that, that means if there's a 700 watt professional mega card on some above PCIe Gen 5 interface, then we should not expect Lovelace to go above that. 450 to 600 watts is looking exceedingly likely for 8102, not 800 watts, just like Moore's Law is dead, and actually recently I believe Igor's labs have leaked. Also, Hopper does not launch until Q3 of 2022. This is an overlooked point that makes it more of an MI300 competitor in this reader's perspective than an MI250X competitor, though it will compete certainly with Intel's Ponte Vecchio that still isn't out yet, and eventually, I think, Rialto Bridge. In fact, the Grace 144 chip, the CPU that's going to be bundled with Hopper eventually, doesn't even seem to launch until 2023. And finally, actually, 2 more things, sorry. The die size is actually similar to A100 again. Again, I would say then AD102 is probably likely to be around 600 millimeters squared, a similar die size to GA102. And also that 4nm thing is notable. Multiple contacts that Moore's Law is dead has spoken with think that this gives Lovelace a 50-50 chance at least of being on 4nm if they also chose this node for Hopper. So yeah, Dan, I mean, I think we got more interesting things to talk about out of the Hopper reveal than we expected, right? I mean, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, for one, I'm still split on the, well, I guess you said 50-50 chance on Lovelace being on 4nm as well, because I just keep thinking A100 was also based, it also used a different node than Ampere, although we'll see.
But yeah, but it's different fabs. Now it's same fabs.
That's true. A100 is a pretty substantially different than Ampere in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know. I kind of forgot how I had to go back and look at A100 again because I didn't realize how much stronger in every way this one is versus A100.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot stronger.
But yeah, I mean, that's a 3x performance uplift in FP32 in 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and on your point of, but they use 2 different nodes for, what is it, A100 and then GA102. Yes, but that's one data point. Also consider that Volta was its own architecture, came out first on 12nm, and then later Lovelace came out also on 12nm with like a 10% smaller die or 20, or so that's I think the comparison, because they're two different architectures, although you might say A100 was kind of its own architecture, honestly, from the rest of Ampere. But because they are literally two different named architectures, I really think the comparison is to Volta and Turing. Hopper is Volta, Lovelace is Turing, probably same node.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we we will see in probably a few months' time if it, or it will become more clear if it's on 4 nanometer. And I mean, I think you've discussed how like they've bought up a lot of 4 nanometer capacity. It could be
right,
definitely.
And that is a reference to a video I had come out analyzing the Hopper reveal that I really recommend people check out. There are a couple other smoking guns I felt that suggested Lovelace could be on 4 nanometer. Number one, we've been hearing all these rumors about how NVIDIA overpaid per wafer for a 5 nanometer family node. Everyone was like, oh, it must be because they had to, because Intel and AMD are buying everything up. Yeah, or they bought a better node than AMD and Intel. Number two, Kopite7 Kimmy, who is one of those Twitter leakers, or one of the only ones that I think really is, you can kind of take him at face value, the guy does his research, said that he expected Hopper to be just below 900 millimeters squared. Now, 4 nanometer is like a 6% die shrink, I believe, if I remember correctly, over N5. And so, yeah, then, I mean, there's a very good chance something he saw was based on the 5 nanometer node. They bought up 4 nanometer and shrunk it because it's almost entirely design compatible between those two nodes. This is no different than what we saw with the Xbox Series X, where the early dies shown were an earlier 7 nanometer, and then the final die was actually on N7P, and it, I believe, was like 10% smaller. So, like, I don't see why some of that discrepancy there might not also point to, oh, yeah, now it's on 4 nanometer, that's why it's smaller than Kopite said, by almost the exact amount that die shrink allows.
Yeah, I mean, you said just under 900, right? So, yeah, that would be like, what, 860, 870 not nanometers, millimeters squared. So, yeah, that's in line with what he said, definitely.
So, I don't know, there's just a lot of evidence there on that, and it would explain a lot about how NVIDIA thinks maybe they can just barely match RDNA 3, although I guess, and so many other things keep coming out that I need to cover or leak before this. I will say, I don't know, I haven't even talked to you about this yet, Dan. Some of the stuff I heard today about RDNA 3 is it's wild. I don't, and I don't even know if I believe it, even my source doesn't, even if there's documentation on it. So we're just going to have to wait and see. I just would say there's a narrow chance. There's just like literally no chance Lovelace competes, but I think it's too early to say. We will see. But, you know, going to 4 nanometer, using the fastest RAM, trying to launch before RDNA 3, which I think it probably will. I don't know. A lot of things in Hopper tell me, like, point to what Lovelace's strategy is.
Yeah, I think you're right. Or at least I think we can be informed by what this is. We can make an educated guess like you have with what Lovelace will look like based on what we saw from Hopper today. And yeah, you're right. I think this suggests at least that they're not going crazy with power consumption.
Well, I mean, define
700
crazy.
watts. They're not going beyond crazy, I guess.
Yes, they're not going to this isn't possible land. They're, I mean, and you know, we'll get to it in a second in the next story. The 3090 Ti, all counts, it runs fine at 450 watts, meaning if they really built one from the ground up for 500 or something, I believe it. You know, I just do not believe 800 watts, and what we're seeing from Hopper does not suggest they will try to attempt that power usage. And one more thing just to re-highlight on Hopper, because again, a lot of people saw this and they're like, whoa, MI250X is screwed. It's like, dude, MI250X, I think technically launched at the end of last year. No, it's not screwed. It's going to have been out for the majority of a year before Hopper's out. And trust me, you haven't seen shit until you see what MI300 is, which will probably be launching 1 or 2 quarters after Hopper, sooner than you guys think. So Hopper is really an MI300 competitor. Now, who is screwed is Ponte Vecchio. Although, looking at the specs, Ponte Vecchio is still competitive. It's just not special, and it probably costs twice as much to make.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's their first generation, right? Yeah, it's Intel's first generation. We'll see how Rialto Bridge compares because what Ponte got leaked or not leaked. Raja Kadori mentioned it like what, a year ago?
Yeah, it's been a while that we've been talking about Ponte Vecchio. It's been a while we've been talking about a lot of things we're going to talk about in this episode, to be honest.
I feel like that's kind of a trend with some of these data center GPUs. What was the one that got endless discussion for like 2 years from AMD? Arcturus.
Yeah. Well, here's another one, Arctic Sound.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? I think I was leaking that in 2019 or something.
Yeah.
And we just saw it a month ago, or I don't know, in a really gimped fashion. But let me move on here. Falto PS5 Series X owner writes in, and he says, people keep mentioning how a Switch successor can rely on DLSS to make up for its weaker specs compared to current-gen consoles, but I'm here doubting how good it could even be. I asked this because DLSS works best when resolution is already high. So for Switch 2's case, it feels like it probably won't help as much as everyone hopes it will. For example, I don't think it would turn 1080p to 4K, but I guess it could help 1080p games be locked to 60. What you guys? How do you think they'll use DLSS? And I did want to bring up this reader mail because this is like a honorable mention that they detailed Orin in more detail at their GDC thing. And there was a smaller die variant of it that was 1,024 CUDA cores with a 10-watt TDP. And I'm like, that's what the Switch 2 is probably based on right there. Some variant of that chip. Mm-hmm. And with 1,024 CUDA cores, you're looking at something, I mean, at best, I'd say half the performance of like a Maybe half the performance of an RTX 2050 or something. You're looking at MX 550 territory, probably in performance. If we're lucky, maybe not even quite that. And so, yeah, that's, like an RX. It's not even an RX 470, to be honest.
No.
It's very like what I said. It seems to suggest something within 30% of a Series S. Now, how will DLSS help that out? I think it can help a lot, actually. I mean, I have DLSS. I have both an Nvidia laptop and desktop. And my 2060 laptop, I play Battlefield 2042 in 1080p with DLSS on in high quality, and it doesn't look like junk to me. I actually don't. I think it works fine in 1080p now. Did it a year ago? No. But it does now, and if they build games from the ground up to use it so they can really tailor to like any artifacts that pop up, I think it really can help a lot. Now, will it make it a 4K console? I don't know. Even if it's like really optimized, we're talking about doubling performance. So then you're like at best talking about at RTX 3050 performance. I don't think it's a 4K console, no.
Maybe there's an outside chance that it's like a 1440p console, but I just don't think Nintendo cares that much, and I think they'll probably go to 1080p. Like what resolutions are the Switch at currently? Like that's
720p. It's 30. It's garbage. So and with like settings below low, like going in and modifying an INI file in one of your games so it can run below low. Like it's going to be massively stronger. And I think the goal is going to be I just have a feeling 1080p screen when it's in mobile mode. Right. I would have aimed for anything more than that. Especially the Steam Deck isn't even 1080p. And then when you dock it, its goal will be to run equivalent, probably 1440p 60 with DLSS, some sort of upscaling around 4K to just not look like crap at 4K 60 on a TV. I think that's its goal. And I think that there will be games where it underperforms a Series S, but most of the time it'll look about the same or a little better. The processors will be probably weaker, though, so I don't know about that part of it. But again, I think around Series S performance plugged in.
Yeah, we can hope.
But again, we don't know. We don't know if they'll go with some cut-down version of that. They certainly could. Who knows if it'll be 500 CUDA cores and it'll go, what the hell? I don't think they'll do that. And I suspect, and it's a custom die, so I hope it would have some of its own performance-enhancing tricks up its sleeve. Hopefully, it's just not like the Wii U situation where custom means weaker than imaginable. But we'll just have to see. I just think, but I guess just to answer his question one more time, Falto. I think will DLSS make up for its weak specs compared to current gen consoles? make up for it in that it'll be comparable to their performance? No. Will it make it so that it should be able to run any games the consoles run? As long as it has at least 12 gigabytes RAM. I actually think it'll run modern games.
Yeah.
Needs an SSD, though.
Yeah, we'll see if they would even go with 12 gigabytes of RAM, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 8. Look, I'm not a morning person. My dog Reese can testify to how hard it is to get me up some days. But at the same time, I'm also not 24 years old anymore. I can't just shotgun 2 whole pots of coffee during a workday and not have my gut get revenge on me eventually. So what is someone like me supposed to do? Well, I can use Magic Mind. Today's content is sponsored by Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a natural little elixir that utilizes matcha, adaptogens, nootropics, honey, and other herbal supplements to do what coffee does, and so much more. It boosts your energy, boosts your memory, boosts your mood, and increases your focus while decreasing inflammation and boosting immunity. Magic Mind can be taken with your morning cup of coffee or with your post-lunch cup as well, just so at the very least, you only need a couple of cups of caffeine a day to feel awake for many hours and not a whole pot. Trust me, I'm not a morning person and I do work long hours most days. This was a decent alternative that really did work, and as opposed to drinking far too much caffeine, and you should try it yourself. Go to magicmind.co/brokensilicon and use code BrokenSilicon20 to get 20% off your first order. This really does help the channel and it helps you stay focused. Help your focus in a healthy way by buying Magic Mind today. Let us move on, though, to story number 2, where we have a product with 3 times 8 gigabytes of RAM, Dan. The RTX 3090 Ti launches. Better than expected, still not good. The write-up is as follows. On March 29th, Nvidia, and I put in quotes, launched the RTX 3090 Ti. Let's be quick about this. It's 10% better than a 3090 in 4K. It consumes 450 to 500 watts. The coolers are massive, and it actually runs with better temps than many 3090s. And the coolers aren't very loud, despite how insanely thick they are, or because of how insanely thick they are. And finally, its MSRP was set at $2,000, not $1,500. Not $2,400. The number of Moore's Law is dead leaked. Although in reality, this thing is selling for $2,200 plus and expected to hit $2,500 to $4,000 for a while. Indeed, one thing to note is that there seems to be very little availability in the US and literally no availability in many other regions, according to Moore's Law Z sources. Furthermore, it seems that there is a Founders Edition, once again exclusive to the US Best Buy, and Moore's Law Z is told that this is also absurdly low volume, probably only existing because of some line in an old contract somewhere that states that Best Buy has to get some reference version of every model they make. That's an entirely new SKU. Oh, and also the fact that it has an MSRP at all, that's a good sign for this market, and likely means that the RDNA 2 refreshes dropping in a month will undoubtedly have an MSRP. These are the cards, of course, that the 3090 Ti was preemptively launched, so the 6950 XT is competition in the charts. All right. What do you think about the 3090 Ti, Dan?
Not too much. It's a little stronger than the 3090. It's it's nominally 30% more expensive. We'll see how well that MSRP holds. It looks like, based on Newegg, even though everything's out of stock, everything's still listed around MSRP, so we'll see how that holds 3 weeks from now. The existence of an MSRP, I guess, like you say, is good. There was some speculation that or some hope that maybe it would end up being $1,500, but that clearly didn't happen. You know, if it were $1,500, I would say clearly the market's moving in a better direction. Yeah. With this, I say it's probably moving in a better direction, but it's still a ridiculously priced card.
I mean, the one thing I will say that's impressing me a little bit, and I do have to point out, this is one of those things where, as much as I get annoyed when people say this in the comments, it does matter what region you're in. I mean, everyone I've talked to outside of the US is like, this thing just does not exist. Whereas it seems like there's an okay amount, how should I put this? There's enough of them for what people want in the US. Like, I go to Newegg, there's one for $2,100 on Newegg right now. So, I mean, that's a little surprising in some ways, but I don't think they're making many of these, so I maintain that. I really just think what you're also seeing is no one wants it.
Yeah, I don't know who it's for. I mean, I guess it's for the people that bought a 3090 and they're going to buy the strongest card out after it, no matter
Or
what.
if they were waiting to get a strong card and it's like, well, this is cheaper than those $3,000 3090s were a month ago.
I guess there might be some people. I can't imagine you get a person who's buying a 3090 Ti isn't already at high to enthusiast tier performance, though.
You don't think there's a large amount of people who like
I guess it's time to go upgrade from my 970.
Yeah, to my 970 to a 3090 Ti that uses quadruple the power. Yeah, probably not, I guess. Good point.
And you have to like saw apart your case to fit it in because it's 14 inches long, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Something that I've done with a previous case of like 5 years ago. If you remember.
Yeah, you did do that once.
Hot tip. If you want to saw pieces of metal or plastic off of a case, bread knives work really well. Can't recommend the bread knife enough.
Bread knives are underrated.
Yeah,
you know?
in general, they're just underrated, which I think it's about time we do a bread knife podcast, Dan.
Yeah, I think that's where we go after we end Broken Silicon.
Yep, it's all
Which
about
this
bread
is the
knives.
last episode of Broken Silicon, all bread knives from now on.
Yep, and that is the name of the podcast, all bread knives from now on. No, but I mean, do you have anything else to say about the 3090 Ti? This is something that could not stop popping up every other news episode for like half a year. And I don't know that I have that much else to say. I think some people actually downplayed how, in quotes, good it would be. Like, they're like, it's going to be 3% better. It's going to, be too hot. It's like, no, you just have like 4-slot coolers. It's actually works fine. And it's not the worst pricing, but it's still, yeah.
I mean, you're paying well, I guess the street price really nothing's caught up to the insane runaway pricing of the 3090 itself. So you could probably get this for cheaper right now as long as that $2,100 3090 Ti still remains available on Newegg. So, but it's like what, 6% stronger than a 3090?
It's like 10%, I'd say.
Okay. So I guess it's more it's an increase in power enough where you can actually say it's kind of a different level of performance. So that's good.
And I think it's worth pointing out that this is probably going to somewhat replace the 3090, and the 3090 12 gigabyte is what they're going to just be rolling out from now on. Below that, which is a little weaker than the 3080 Ti, which is a little weaker than the 3090, which means they may have like a 15% gap or more between, or 15 to 20% gap now between 3080 12 gigabyte and 3090 Ti. So there's kind of a tiered thing going on.
Yeah, it's better than being a completely pointless product, I guess.
Yeah.
But I can't say much more than that. I do like the I always love when a new strongest card comes out. It's like the strongest card is now available. And it's like, yeah, this happens every 1.5 to 2 years. This isn't like that groundbreaking or unprecedented of an event.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, especially when you've had the newest card, the strongest card come out 3 times this generation or whatever.
Yeah.
QH Freddy writes in, could Nvidia have just been waiting to release the 3090 Ti for the new ATX power supply spec, that 12+4 power connector, before putting the 3090 Ti on the market? I don't think so. I think there is something to point out here that this uses the fully fledged newest gen power spec, whereas basically what Ampere used was a dumb version of it, probably to allow NVIDIA engineers to practice with this type of connector and stuff. And in some ways, the 3090 Ti is actually in some ways practice for preparing for the insanity that's going to happen with Lovelace, I would argue.
Oh, yeah, that's...
But I don't think they held the release for that.
Probably not, no.
I mean, my understanding is EVGA had working cards because of how over-engineered it was months ago. It's just, overall, they needed to do a redesign because of just a flurry of issues having to do with power and like the RAM. There's a bunch of issues. I don't think it was just that, but it is notable that now there's a 12+4 pin, and that +4 allows, I believe, more crosstalk between the card and the power supply to better regulate voltage.
Okay.
Jensen Wang, NVIDIA CEO, writes in, he says, do you think the larger VRAM amounts on GPUs, making the cost to double VRAM much higher, may result in GPU vendors choosing to make wider memory buses than necessary in the future to enable a lower BOM without blowing the pricing out of the water? In other words, if you look at Navi 33 with its presumably 128-bit bus, as you keep saying, having 8 gigabytes, maybe instead of designing with a 192-bit bus to enable a 12 gigabyte model for $50 more or something versus $100 for 16 gigabyte models, or with the increase in MSRP ceiling, do you think the models may become separated far enough to enable $100 plus MSRP differences on the same level of GPU performance? I think there's already people doing this. You already see, I think AMD is putting a lot of thought already into how they've segmented memory of the RDNA 2 lineup, the RDNA 3 lineup. You have these bizarre situations like the 6500 XT, but also 6500 XT wasn't even really going to exist in the way that it did. It just ended up because the market allowed it. There's
it's
still
a laptop card.
Yeah, there's still a lot of thought put into the amount of memory on each of those dies. And I mean, today we're about to get to it. Alchemist SoC2, the smaller die of the Alchemist lineup, has a 96-bit bus, and like most of the volume will probably be 64-bit, but they're like, yeah, let's use 10 millimeters squared to make sure we can have variants when we need to that have a boost in performance and memory. And what I would say is I think they're already doing this. And I think, again, all this hullabaloo, it won't go away, and I think it's interesting to discuss, I understand, but all this hullabaloo of like the Navi 33 being 128-bit with 8 gigabytes, I just don't know why people don't get this through their heads. It's not a high-end card. It's Navi 33. Navi 23 had 8 gigabytes. I know it might be as strong as a 6900 XT in 1440p, and gasp, 8 gigabytes is enough for 1440p. Just because it's as strong as a 6900 XT does not mean that it needs to have 16 gigabytes. Navi 21 was a high-end card, meant to last a long time at 4K, and then games get harder to run. You don't need more RAM, you need more grunt. And I mean, it's like did the 2060 have enough RAM at 6 gigabytes? I wouldn't say it had more than enough, but it had enough. And, it was the same performance as... I think a 1080 or something. I think so. And that at 8 gigabytes. Or look at the 1060. I think 6 gigabytes was enough for the 1060, despite the Polaris cell. I think over time we found the 1060 really hasn't aged that badly. And what was its performance? I mean, the equivalent of, I believe, a 980, which was, if we go back, certainly stronger than the first Titan that had 6 gigabytes, and so does just every card has to have more than that? I don't think so.
Especially because... if you're getting a Navi 33 graphics card next year to play in 1440p or something, you don't have to have maximum resolutions to maximize 1440p. At 1440p, you might not be able to tell the difference between medium and high ultra settings in a lot of games at 1440p.
And now you can just run it 200 hertz or something insane with this card.
Yeah, and that's fine. And you can probably even push some games to 4K still with resolution scaling.
Yeah. Carbon Cry writes in, and he says, my perspective on the 8 gigabyte RDNA 3 mid-range discussion is that I think 8 gigabytes is enough for the performance here, honestly. Especially within an abundance of compute, we should see future games trade compute enhancements of, say, textures over just sprawling out into memory, especially if AMD sticks with 8 gigabytes in the mid-range. Current expectations of devs is not more than 8 gigabytes. If that does not significantly change, but compute becomes cheaper, that's what devs will use to improve graphics first. Besides, my Supernova Vega 56 still has 8 gigabytes. Are you telling me this holy GPU would have become obsolete? I don't think so.
Yeah, the Vega 56 definitely isn't obsolete, Tom.
You might say it's obsolescent. You would not choose it over anything we have now. Not that it's obsolete. And you guys got to stop complaining about the 8 gigabytes. Just save your energy for it having 8 fucking PCIe lanes again. Swifty writes in, Alcon, is it time to cash out the 3080 Space Heater Edition for a backup 3060 Ti? Maybe sell both and survive off a 1060 laptop? I wanted to go AMD this gen, but the EVGA Notify system took little effort. I say maybe. I may actually, from a sponsor, I already have a GTX 3050 behind me to compare to my 6500 XT I'm testing. But I may have another 3050 on the way from a sponsor, and I may sell my 3070 and just make do with a 3050, which is about, desktop 3050s somewhat close to my laptop's 2060 Max Q that I've
Mhm.
overclocked to almost be as strong as a desktop 2016. You know, it's fine. I use my laptop all the time to play Age of Empires 4, Deep Rock Galactic. Sometimes I'll even just, instead of going up into the office where my desktop is, I'll just plug an HDMI to my laptop and play Battlefield 2042 and like 1080p 100 instead of going upstairs. I just don't care. I just want to sit on the couch. And so I think I could slum it with that level of performance with a 3050. Not that I pay $400 for a 3050. I got it from a sponsor. For a while, just waiting for RDNA 3 and Lovelace. And I think this is a real question a lot of people need to consider. And, especially people like me who have a console and a PC. We've just been playing Elden Ring and Far Cry 6 on PS5 a lot, too, anyways, for PS5. So I think it's something I'm definitely considering. And I think if you can sell a card for $1,000 and you have like a $300, $400 card that's good enough, then yeah, I mean, we're getting into a similar situation before Ampere launched. It's just, remember, don't sell your card unless you already have one to use.
Yeah.
And understand that it might not be easy to get the exact card you want at a new product launch, that you do need to jump on it. I can't believe how many people said I was right for 6 months and then all of a sudden magically wrong for a year. And then now I'm right again when it comes to that video I did saying sell your 2080 Ti. Which, for the record, you should have always sold your 2080 Ti, even at double MSRP, $900. The 6700 XT was available for that price, and a 12 gigabyte 2080 Ti. You could have sold and made money.
I mean, I really can't imagine like not deciding to take a modest or, I mean, to a 3060 Ti from a 3080 is a big decrease in performance, but you can play any game on a 3060 Ti that you can on a 3080. You have to lower settings. And I can't imagine almost not making that choice if it's available to me, if I can sell a 3080 for what? Like probably $1,000 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you could use the $1,000, go for it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think now's the month to make the decision. I think this is a real thing everyone's got to start thinking about. If you find a 3058 gigabyte for $300, okay, you can slum it with that. Sell your 3090, dude. Make thousands of dollars.
And I'm not making a proclamation about this, but like, it's not typical that PC parts are assets. So
no, they're not supposed to be. Even if this becomes more of the norm and more cyclical, there are still going to be drops in the future. You should not always assume your GPU will be worth more.
Yeah. So there's going to be a point, I think, where these one day your 3080 might be worth $1,200, and then a month later it's worth like $800 again.
Mm-hmm. And if it's not worth the hassle to you, I totally get it, dude. But it might be for a lot of people. I saw in the comments and on our Discord go about a year ago, I'm tired of waiting. I bought a 6700 XT for $1,000. That money matters to you. Sell it. Because in fact, actually, on that note, I believe this will come out on a Thursday when AMD typically drops their volume of, reference cards on their website at MSRP. I believe last week the 6700 XT was in stock on their website for about an hour. So yeah, it's happening, guys. There's decisions to be made here. Sino764 writes in, "Hi Tom and Dan. With entry-level graphics cards seemingly disappearing in the near future and the power consumption of graphics cards going up even in the new quote-unquote low-end section, do you think there is room for an APU with a higher TDP and more of that power budget spent on the integrated graphics portion that could step into this void, or do you think Intel and AMD will just continue to make the type of APUs they keep making now with an iGPU barely ever sipping more than 15 watts by itself?" I say eventually, absolutely they will, but what everyone needs to remember is it's going to need to be used for a specific laptop niche. Do-it-yourself gaming is a niche that isn't worth making a gaming APU for. There's going to have to be some reason they made it for laptop that also is brought to desktop and then overclocked like crazy. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I even think their most recent releases are starting to get close to that. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before something like this comes out.
And I think, what do we got coming? I think we have Raphael H, which is like the 16-core laptop version of their 16-core Zen 4, with like a tiny 4 compute unit, integrated graphics, but meant to be paired with a discrete GPU. And then they'll have Phoenix, which I don't remember the specs. I honestly haven't paid enough attention to that, considering it's probably coming in under a year. That will be their Zen 4 APU, to my knowledge. I don't know if it has more than 12 compute units or not. I don't remember if it was 12 or 16 or something like that. But that's still kind of just replacing the standard of what they have now. And the question will be, will there be an in-between or something? Will there be a 6-core Zen 4 with like a 24 compute unit GPU? I don't know yet. I still don't know that's what they're going to decide to do. But it'd take that, and they made it... See, Apple makes their own APUs now, so that's the target market for that in the past. The person who would want this now is probably Microsoft Surface. The thing is, Surface keeps screwing over AMD, by the way, guys. Like, AMD keeps designing APUs for Surface that keep not being used. Like, they had that one 12-nanometer one. God, what was it? I want to say it was like the 2 or 3 3780U or something. It was like that, a little more customized version of their 11 or 12 compute unit, 12-nanometer Zen Plus APU, I believe. And then Intel just launched golden samples of Ice Lake next to it, and that pissed off AMD because AMD thought they were going to get the exclusive flagship Surface. And then my understanding is Van Gogh was also kind of meant to be a Surface killer, and then also didn't get used by Microsoft. This just keeps happening. So I don't know if, in other words, if Apple's making their own APUs and Microsoft keeps screwing over AMD, I don't know who the customer is that makes them make this. But that's what I think needs to happen.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
All right, let us move on then to story number 3. FSR 2.0 detailed. All right, here's the write-up. On March 23rd, AMD gave PC gamers a peek under their DLSS 2.3 competitor's hood. In summary, FSR 2.0 is generally much more closely related to how DLSS 2.0 works than how FSR 1.0 works. Screenshots and videos shown by AMD so far suggest this really could be a direct competitor to DLSS, with impressive results seen compared to even the latest DLSS performance. And unlike DLSS, FSR 2.0 remains open source and does not require machine learning hardware. FSR 2.0 does, though, require much more work to implement into a game's engine than FSR 1.0, based on what we can tell, and based on, of course, my discussions with developers. Brian Heemskirk was one that was on the last Broken Silicon. Although it does still seem much easier to implement than DLSS. So, most likely, RSR will slowly grow as an FSR 1.0 evolving branch for easy implementation into as many games as possible. That's what FSR 1.0's tech will be used for. And FSR 2.0 is unlikely to ever really be added to RSR, more so taking longer to implement and being used in the latest games as a direct DLSS competitor. FSR 2.0 launches Q2 2022. All right. Do you have any thoughts on FSR 2.0, Dan?
I think it's interesting. Like, it's just a kind of a complete, it sounds to me like it's a complete reworking of FSR. Like, it's not even, from what I can tell, at all based on FSR 1.0 at all, correct?
Barely. It's an entirely different thing, yeah.
Which, to me sounds like they probably won't be able to implement an RSR-like feature with it, even though, in my opinion so far, I have not been demonstrated that RSR is even a feature. But that we'll see how that gets better with later iterations. I'm sure it will.
Listen to the last die shrink if people want to know what we're talking about. But go on.
To me, this sounds like they're taking FSR seriously. The fact that they're kind of completely reworking it. FSR 1.0 to me isn't necessarily a failure, but I don't think it was a big victory for AMD. I don't think FSR 1.0 turned out to be what we were hoping it would be.
It wasn't like the market dominating force that I think some people thought it might be. And, again, I can't recommend the last Broken Silicon enough. Doing very well in the numbers. But if you haven't listened to it, I know some people skip the guest episodes. Brian and me were talking, and it became very clear that one of the reasons, and I did point this out, I did my work ahead of time. Yes, FSR is gaining more support in an aligned perspective compared to DLSS. DLSS had no support when it came out. Eventually it had 5 or something games in its first year. Its first 2 years, it had like 40 games. But since FSR's come out, it's gained 100. It's been like I forgot what it's at. It's like 80 games or something that support it. In that 1 year period where FSR has gone from 0 to 80, DLSS has gone from 40 to 150. Meaning, yes, FSR is gaining support faster in an aligned sense, but DLSS added more DLSS games in FSR's first year than FSR added themselves. So I don't think there's this argument that FSR has more support. As far as we can tell, DLSS is going to keep more support, more prevalent support. And one of the main reasons I think that emerged in the last Broken Silicon for why that probably is actually something that worked against FSR. It's easy to implement, but it's added at the end of the game. And once a game's done, developers don't want to add a bunch of lines of code that could break the game. And if you force them to program it from the beginning, like DLSS does, they're actually maybe more likely to adopt it.
Yeah. And, just looking at screenshot comparisons that, AMD has put out, it looks like it's closer to being completely lossless than kind of a compromise that FSR 1.0 was, where it's a little blurrier than native resolution. So if it gets implemented more widely than FSR 1.0, I think it's a legitimate competitor to DLSS because, and I know they're different, but FSR 1.0 just doesn't hold a candle to what Nvidia has done with DLSS in the past year.
No, I don't think so. It just isn't quite there yet. Competition begets more competition. With FSR comes out, all of a sudden Nvidia's making sure it's in every single new release and that it works perfectly. Yeah. And at the same time, though, AMD is innovating, and they have something that I think has, from what I'm hearing, it is scaring Nvidia, even if Nvidia is keeping pace, is what I would say. And I'm very excited to see it, honestly. And I want us to get to a world where every game is FSR 2.0, every game is DLSS and XE super sampling, because look, in Battlefield 2042, I'm able to game in 4K 100 with a 3070. That's nice.
Yes.
Let us move on, though. I just mentioned it a little bit to story number 4. Intel's XE super sampling detailed. All right, and I've got kind of a tweet right up here combining things from video cards in a WCCF Tech article. In a series of GDC 2022 talks, the company, Intel, outlined the challenges temporal upscaling technologies are facing, the requirements to make them as broadly supported as possible, and the performance uplift benefits for end users. Specifically, Intel engineers mentioned that upscaling and anti-aliasing should be treated as a single problem. There's a mountain of data, enough data, and the final picture should take all of it into account for the final image, not just one thing or another, depending on which type of upscaling tech you're using in a given game. Older games and older GPUs may see better results and quicker implementation with spatial upscalers, but newer games that support ray tracing and other graphics-intensive technologies will undoubtedly see better performance in visuals with temporal upscalers. The company reaffirmed that all GPUs with support for shader model 6.4 plus DP4A instructions will support the technology. Still, XE super sampling will work best with their own ARC and other graphics architectures with matrix extension acceleration support, a big feature being tooted about Z. Game developers should not worry, though, as XE super sampling will have a single API, and use of either XMX or DP4A models will be managed internally. Unlike AMD's FSR 2.0 and NVIDIA's DLSS 2.3, Intel XE super sampling will feature 5 image quality modes, including ultra quality mode, with a 1.3x scaling factor. The scaling factor is not available with DLSS and FSR. Intel claims that their technology can achieve higher scaling ratios than other temporal and spatial upscaling technologies. The ultra quality mode will improve performance by 21 to 27% for 1440p and 4K resolutions respectively, while ultra performance mode will offer 97 to 153% better frame rates for both of those resolutions as well. Those numbers are based on the REN's demo powered by an Arc Alchemist GPU running at fixed, undisclosed frequencies recently. All right, Dan, what did you see about XE super sampling? Anything I didn't cover there that impressed you or that you think is noteworthy?
No, I don't think so. It sounds to me like I can't remember exactly. I think it was that presser they put out where they said that they're using several different sources of data to compile it the best image they can, which is interesting, and I'm curious to see how that works out. I mean, my thing is always like with these where we still only have like press
Mm-hmm.
or desired press images from them so far, so there's not that much to go off of. Like the demo I watched today, I thought the way they presented it was kind of odd, like presenting their Z super sampling next to 1080p and then not having a frame rate next to it. So it was kind of hard to compare what they were trying to show me. I mean, I think the takeaway they're trying to say is you get 1080p performance with 4K image quality. Like, the image is obviously better looking, but
Intel does seem to be, with all of their demos and press releases for Xe super sampling so far, focusing on the quality more so than the performance increase.
yeah, that's true. I mean, they're touting, like, though, almost, 2.5x increase in performance in the ultra performance mode, which I'm curious to see how that will look. But
yeah,
that's pretty substantial.
Again, though, look, I'm seeing a lot of big buzzwords. I'm seeing a lot of cool numbers and names and flashy little videos. And it seems like it has maybe the most potential to be a killer feature out of everything else I've seen, in that it seems to have the super tightly programmed, accelerated specifically by their own architecture qualities of DLSS, and the open standards and easy implementation, supposedly, of FSR. So hopefully it gets wide adoption in every game by devs. But until we see it actually used on an Alchemist card, I don't know how much I have to say. At the end of the day, it's all buzzwords. Does it look as good as 4K when I actually try it? Does it actually give me a big performance boost? Does it not have tons of artifacts? That's all I want to know. And we just, it's all marketing so far.
Yeah, and given that it's an open source, I'm not remembering where ZSS should theoretically work on, but I think it will also be really interesting to see how it performs on, AMD graphics cards.
Yes. Well, Aiden FS writes in. It says, "Hey, Tom," and then in parentheses, "and Dan. Kind of strange that the ARC limited edition card render they showed off today is missing the external power connectors. Are they really trying to hide the power usage of the top desktop cards at this point? Are they deciding whether to use the PCIe 5 connector or not? Obviously not using all 600 watts. And then, KH Freddy also writes in and says, "Do you think Intel's regretting the Q1 2022 promise they made?" Aiden, I don't know that they're specifically trying to hide that, but I think they're still hiding things. And QH Freddy, yeah, I think they regret announcing Q1. All of this leads into story number 5. Story number 5, Intel Alchemist revealed ... kinda. On March 30th, Intel fully detailed their A370M GPU. This is the mobility 64-bit version of, in quotes, SoC2, aimed to compete with the RTX 2050, presumably, and 1650 type cards in the 35 to 50 watt sector of discrete laptop GPUs, and is based on the limited data provided. Yeah, it may be about as strong as a desktop 1650 in laptops, and the 96-bit desktop version could beat the 1650 Super at 75 watts. Additionally, worth mentioning, ARC indeed seems to have very impressive AI and encoding capabilities. The software stack seems to be fully featured, although it looks a little too simple to be finished in this speaker's opinion. While the laptop variant of SoC2 is launching in April, the desktop version is still unlikely to be seen right away, as far as we can tell. In fact, early summer is quoted for the desktop launches, with, in quotes, summer being stated for a special edition of the high-end desktop. To me, suggesting that full high-end DG2 may not actually be available till late Q3 or even Q4. So in summary, Moore's Law said feels Intel has revealed enough to back up early performance leaks. Check out Moore's Law said's video that came out a day before this podcast. But something still seems off. And these cards don't really feel like they are launching to desktop for a few months. Damn, what did you think? I mean, it was a slick video, but there were some red flags that popped out real quick. Like, I was writing down early summer in big letters on a piece of paper.
Well, early summer, that probably means July.
Yep.
Yeah, their ARC reveal, of course, they highlight laptop first, and I guess we now kind of know what their laptop GPU looks like. We still don't really know that much about, or we don't know really any details beyond what we knew previously about their desktop cards, except for what it looks like, I guess, which I don't know. It's a good design. I mean, I think the design looks good. We'll see how it looks when it's not just a render.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the fact that their big reveal for the desktop cards is a single render without any details suggests that this is not coming out for a couple months at least, or few months at least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of other red flags. I looked through the frame rate data that they showed, and as I thought they might, they did not compare it to competitors' graphics cards. I will be blown away, because Intel hates doing that, acknowledging their competitors. I'm just going to laugh so hard if they're like A780, 5 times stronger than integrated graphics. It's like, guys, compare it to the 3070. But I mean,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, there are a lot of people asking me questions in the Discord. Well, do you think the chart starts at 0? And I saw Hitman 1080p medium settings getting 40 frames on the strongest integrated graphics with 96 execution units. Yeah, I think that's legitimate. That 40 frames seems about right for that, I think. And Hitman 3, that's a very efficiently run game. So I think their charts seem accurate. I don't see any funny business going on yet. And based on that, I think it seems like, yes, the 128 execution unit model is up to double the performance of the 96 integrated. But on average, it seems to be more like 40 to 60% stronger, which places the mobile version at 1650 performance, which, if you can get that, that's a lot better than 1650 Max Q. You know, it's like 40% better. And I think the desktop version, which should have at least 50% more bandwidth and about 50% higher clocks, should get you something that's pretty close to a 590. And I think the data is there. You know, that's what the video I put out today, before we recorded this, really highlighted is the numbers they're showing now, do they back up what's been leaked for over a year now about performance? And they do. They do. I think the desktop card can be like a $150 to a $200 card. 6 gigabytes, that's like a 590 that uses maybe a third the energy of a 590. That's cool. I think that if you extrapolate it up, assume decent scaling, we're looking at something at least as strong as a 3060 Ti, maybe up to a 3070 Ti. We'll just have to see. I keep saying this. The numbers are there to support a 3070 competitor. They're there. There's still nothing popping up that shows the performance can't be hit. It just seems like it's obvious that it's like low-end laptop launches, then maybe low-end desktop, then early summer we'll get high-end laptop, then high-end desktop. It just seems like they're really stalling to get the top performance model out. And I think it has to be because, remember, they've been making drivers for a 96 execution unit model for a while. Getting to 128 is doable. I just think more performance pitfalls are popping up that need more optimization the higher they try to scale the drivers with the stronger cards, and they're just stalling for time here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue with jumping the gun. You know what I mean? Like, they announced ARC probably too early. You know, maybe it's
a year after I had pictures of it.
True.
That's just how ridiculous this is. Sorry, go on.
But I mean, when I say they released it, they showed it off too early. I mean, like, look at what's happened. It's been almost a year that we've been talking about when will ARC come out, and the problem with when you release stuff too early, you announce stuff too early, is you have to keep reminding people of it permanently.
Yeah, I mean, let me see here. Timo writes in. He says, "Hi. Considering DG2 driver issues, is there a possibility Intel decides they just got to ship this thing no matter what, with AMD and Nvidia's new gens getting pushed out in Q3? If that 4 million number produced cards are sitting somewhere in warehouses soon, they are right now, to my understanding, to be honest, and Battle Mage coming in less than a year, common sense would say to just push DG2 out to market sooner rather than later. Customers are just going to have to decide at some point." And I think the answer is yes. And I think they're literally pushing it up to the line where they just have to launch it.
Yeah,
which is like what, a month before the competition. That's the latest. They can wait.
I mean, I think this would be a different story if this was coming out in April or or had already came out, because all right, now they have like 4 or 5 months before we really start seeing what the RDNA 3 and Lovelace will be. And now it's just like by the time this comes out, we might basically just know what those are.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, for sure. I think so. I think, yeah, by the time, it says summer. So July at the earliest, I think. I think by then, for sure, I'm going to have my RDNA 3 lineup out. Leak. Yeah.
Unless they are actually taking the word early summer seriously and it comes out like the last week of June, which,
But Dan, they say early summer for the Arc 5 and Arc 7 tiers, and then they say summer for special edition. So I don't know, man.
That's the thing is, my assumption whenever a company says a time period is that it's going to be at the absolute last day it could be in that time period. So if you say early summer, what's the last day we can call early summer? July 20th? Like,
you know that meme of like Spider-Man pointing at the same thing over and over, and it just like says a different thing? I'm just thinking of like if someone could make a meme of Intel being Spider-Man pointing around and going quarter one and calling the same thing different quarters, quarter one over and over.
Quarter one 2022 verse, and actually means quarter three, late quarter three.
Yeah.
2022.
Bullethead writes in, "Hey Tom and Dan, just want to know, now that Intel is finally talking about Arc, are we still on track to get low-end discrete DG2 first? Are your sources feeling confident that Intel has a solid, locked-in plan? Or is there still some uncertainty in the air about the discrete rollout?" Well, there's a certainty about like the laptop 128. That thing's been locked in for months. I think I've been pretty clear. No, that really is coming out April. So that's locked in. In terms of everything else, no, there's still some up in the air about exactly when each desktop model's coming out, I would say. With, I guess, most people saying there's no way it's after June. But when I look at today's presentation, I go, I don't know. In fact, I think I told you this, Dan, a while ago, but I failed to leak it because I just didn't feel confident in it quite yet. But the name of that Intel Arc launch timeframe video from February, the folder's named Arc launches quarter 4. And I didn't name the video that or really highlight that. And that came from a thing I got from one of my best sources that said the cheaper reference model, not the special edition, may not be out till quarter 4, and the AIB model may actually launch first. Now, when I look at today's video, I go, well, shit, that source may have been right. Like,
yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, a special edition is launching quarter 3. Does that mean the normal edition is launching quarter 4? Like that source said? Because I can't help but go, good Lord, maybe it's plausible. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, guys. I'm letting you in on one whisper I heard from one of my best sources just because I think it's hilarious. It actually feels plausible now.
I mean, and if that's the case, it's like this discussion of whether in their first attempt, do we really think they're going to get to high-end performance is so trite. Like, because we're talking about high, what would you call the 3070? High mid-range or low high-end? Right?
Yeah, sure. Point? Somewhere around there. So, I'd say upper mid-range at this point. It's been out for almost 2 years.
Yeah, so at a certain point we're saying, yeah, it's going to be this power. Their top-level GPU might be a little stronger than a high mid-range card from 2 years ago. Like, that's not that big of an achievement.
No. The only achievement is that they managed to make it at all, whereas no other competitor seems to be able to.
And if they can actually serve the low-end market, or what's become the low-end market, and release a card for $150 or something like that, that would be great. And I think a card like that is needed in the market. But at the high end, what they are going to end up having at their highest end card this first time around is probably going to amount to what, like a 40, whatever the 4060s level of performance turns out to be.
I was going to say, way ahead of you here, I opened up my Lovelace leak, and I'm looking at the slide right now. I see AD106, likely the RTX 4050 Ti. It's a 128-bit card with 4600 CUDA cores. and I think he'll be between RTX 2080 Super and 2080 Ti rasterization performance, with ray tracing probably a little bit above a 3070. So yes, I think Nvidia may have a $300 card that is startlingly close to the performance of top Alchemist. No one of 16 gigabytes, guys, because now it's low end. Now it's going to be 8. You just have to deal with that. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, they may have an 8 gigabyte version of Alchemist for $300. And so that just tells you, I think Intel needs to make their high-end 16 gigabyte card 400 out of the gate.
Yeah.
I just do. I think it's been too late. And again, remember, I have sources telling me they're willing to buy market share, so they might. Amiel Chief writes in. He says, no HDMI 2.1. Alchemist only has 2.0B. And on A3 Mobile, how does that bode for the A5M and A7M? What about desktop parts? I mean, that was another red flag for me. It doesn't have HDMI 2.1, and it might be DisplayPort 2.0 ready. So I looked at DisplayPort 2.0. Seems to be capable of 4K 240. Excited for that. But maybe. And it's like, how many times are we going to say this? It seems obvious to me. This has some IP that was designed years ago, and this card was supposed to come out 1 year ago. So that right there almost makes it not an option for me. I have a 4K 120 display. You have a 4K 120 display. My TV downstairs supports 4K 120 via HDMI.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. This could be a cost-cutting thing because it's not like that the A370M is going to push 4K 120 hertz very well. So maybe and I doubt it's going to be paired with any laptops that have this is an HDMI output, but I doubt it's going to come with any displays that are 4K 120 hertz on laptops. So hopefully it's just a cost-cutting thing.
I bet it does. That's becoming not that crazy.
Hopefully this is just some cost-cutting thing because you're not going to be able to use this card for 4K 120 hertz gaming. I mean, I'm saying like this doesn't necessarily mean that the A7 mobiles, the A700 mobile series isn't going to have 2.1, I don't think.
Well, I mean, and again, it has DisplayPort, so I know my laptop with a Turing 2060, its USB-C out does 4K 144 hertz. So I assume it can do that, but the fact that its HDMI port itself might not support 4K 120 seems really annoying. And again, me screams is a graphics card that's supposed to come out a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Melodic Warrior writes in, after seeing the initial launch announcement of ARC, I'm starting to be a bit more hopeful for a successful launch of new graphics. That said, I could not help but notice the support for video codecs they will have out of the gate. My question is, how well do you think the AV1 support from Intel will stack up against Nvidia and Radeon support? From where I'm sitting, it looks like they have a built-in accelerator that will work great for professionals. For the semi-professionals, the software support is going to be limited to a degree. That said, at the end of the day, I'm of the opinion it made Nvidia look a bit silly because they beat them in AV1 encoding support first. Also, what do you think of Intel's Deep Link? I mean, I think all of this looks impressive, honestly. I think the encoding performance and AI upscaling stuff I saw looked really cool.
Yeah, I guess we forgot to bring that up. That was a very legitimately impressive part of that presentation. How they're almost able to seemingly add information to old videos and not have it be artifacty as hell is interesting. Although we'll see if the not being artifacty as hell thing is an actual issue or not, because they did show 3 videos. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, look, my 4K 120 hertz monitor uses DisplayPort 1.4, so that can support it. If it comes out, and again, but the timing is making me go, I'm probably just waiting for Lovelace or something. But if it comes out in July and it can encode and render my videos like 4 times faster than what I have now, I will get it, even if I only keep it for a few months, because that's going to be cool. We'll just have to see. But I don't have much to say to Melodic Warrior about this besides it looks impressive. And I've been linking this the whole time that the encoding and rendering performance has always been a planned major selling point of this lineup.
I definitely. Intel, I think, puts a lot of work in there, like in non-gaming performance. I mean, all of them do, but I think Intel particularly emphasizes it.
Well, there is one product that likes to emphasize gaming performance quite a bit, and it is the subject of story number 6. Today's video is brought to you by CDKeyOffer.com. As I put together a new benchmarking station for 2022, I know that whether it's running Windows 10 or Windows 11, I will be getting that key from CDKeyOffer.com. And that's because it's a reliable, long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead that gets you reasonable prices on legitimate keys for these types of products. But it's really not all that they offer. They also can give you keys for Microsoft Office, keys for PlayStation codes, and even some of the latest PC releases like Elden Ring, a game that I'm enjoying quite a bit. Whatever you need, CDKey Offer probably has you covered. And they're always running sales, but make sure you use the best code possible. And that's the ones provided for the Moore's Law is Dead fans. Moore's Law is Dead fans get the biggest discount. And if you go to the link on screen or in the description, you can use code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off Microsoft products and DieShrink to get 3% off everything else on the website. Using these codes really does help Moore's Law is Dead, and it helps you pay reasonable prices for games that you want and keys that, frankly, you just have to use half of the time. So, again, use the link in the description, use Broken Silicon, use DieShrink depending on the products you're getting, and pay reasonable prices for keys today at CDKeyOffer.com. 12th Gen Intel Core i9-12900KS launches as the world's fastest desktop processor. This week, Intel announced their new flagship i9-12900KS CPU. Its specs are as follows: up to 5.5 GHz max turbo frequency with Intel Thermal Velocity Boost, 16 cores, 8 cores, 8 cores still, 24 threads, a 150-watt processor base power, 30 megabytes of Intel Smart Cache, and PCIe Gen 5 and 4.0 support, of course, up to DDR5 4800 mega transfers per second, chipset compatibility with existing Z690 motherboards, the latest BIOS recommended for the best gaming experience, and a $740 MSRP. Availability starting on April 5th. Indeed, there's not much to say about this chip. It uses a lot of power, but it is undoubtedly the strongest desktop chip one can buy, and it's about 20%, 30% more than the previous flagship. All this is to say, the 5950X should definitely be priced below $700 from now on, when Intel's a 5.5 gigahertz gaming processor for just above $700. All right, Dan, it's official. What do you think of it?
I mean, I think there's a massive thing they're missing with a co-advertising deal they could have done, Tom.
Oh, yeah?
Sonic 2 comes out on April 8th.
Okay.
Why isn't this the 12900K Sonic edition? It's got to go fast.
I wasn't sure where you were going with it, but, you know, as much as we joke, that kind of could have worked. It's just there's not a game. If there was a Sonic game coming out.
That's true.
They could have bundled the game with it. What, are they going to bundle the Sonic movie ticket? It's like, I'm not even sure what's happening anymore.
That's true. I mean, it was a half-baked joke that I came up with on the spot, but yeah, if it was a game, it would have been a better deal. But, you know, co-advertising, cross-pollination, baby, that's the name of advertising.
Yeah, synergy. Let's merge Sony and Heinz.
Oh, yeah.
That's totally logical. Let's do corporate consolidation. No, but I don't have much to say about this. I mean, look, I suspect, much like the 3090 Ti, people will overestimate how unwieldy it will be. It'll be much more reasonable than people expect for its power usage. But yeah, it's going to use like over 200 watts while gaming probably, but it's going to run at 5.5 gigahertz. So,
which is impressive.
Yeah, it's not like before where it was like, which again, you know, we're getting a little pedantic here because it's like, what really is the 5% difference in speed? But still, you know, before when it was like, I mean, what, you had Rocket like trying to get to 5.2 while using 300 watts or something stupid. At least here it's 5.5 and easily the strongest processor. So I think, you know, it's not like it's $1,000. I think there will be people who definitely buy this.
Oh, yeah. And there, I think there are people I would recommend buying this to, especially like you point out, its competitor is more expensive and weaker, which is kind of the position Intel used to be in a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm. Alchemist writes in, And he says, with Alder Lake and Zen 3 being relatively similar performance, why is AMD's data center chip so much better than Intel's offerings? I always thought data center chips are just scaled up versions of consumer products, but clearly there's more to it. What sort of issues does Intel run into with scaling up consumer chips to data center? So it's really, I think, more of the other way around. It's the data center scaled down to consumers. Data center comes first.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're using chiplets, the bigger the chip, the more they benefit from chiplets, at least in terms of raw silicon you can throw into a socket. And so the smaller you get, the more monolithic doesn't have a disadvantage. In fact, it has an advantage a lot of the times. That's why AMD still is monolithic in APUs, because if you're below 200 millimeters squared, your yields are near 100% anyways.
Mm-hmm.
You might as well just make it monolithic, and Intel's not as much in a disadvantage anymore. We'll see what happens with Zen 4, like if AMD pulls a rabbit out of a hat, does launch a 32-core chip or something insane, and then they're like, there. But so far, they're not doing that. They're selling the same chips they've been selling for years. So not only have they really not taken advantage of what they probably could have done if they pushed everything to the limit like they did with Zen 2 on desktop, they're selling old chips, and Intel's, got a newer lineup.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Dan.
No.
All right. Well, here's something that I suspect you'll have a lot to say something about, is this was one of those other stories that dropped, a day or so before we started recording. Story number 7. PlayStation Plus revamped to compete with Game Pass, launching in June. Now, here's the write-up. For months, or honestly years, there have been rumors that Sony was working on some sort of response to Game Pass. Although lately the rumors have been much more voracious, and now, as of March 29th, much more fruitful. Indeed, Sony has finally announced a new set of tiers that absorb services previously offered by their PS Now platform of middling success. The tiers are as follows. Number 1, PS Plus Essentials. This is literally just the existing service of PS Plus that offers a couple of games per month, larger discounts during sales, cloud storage, online multiplayer access, and the price hasn't changed. $60 a year, although I must highlight, I've never paid that much for it. I think I've always paid about $40 per year based on deals. And then above that is PS Plus Extra, which gives you up to 400 PS4 and PS5 games from first and third-party partners for $100 a year. And then PS Plus Premium, a catalog of over 700 games, including PS3 games via streaming, and PS2 and PSP classics. You also get streaming for seemingly the entire PS Now catalog to both PlayStation consoles and PCs in time-limited game trials. This tier costs $120 per year, seemingly just combining the cost of PS Now and PS Plus's previous yearly cost. There's also a deluxe tier as well for markets that don't have game streaming access, kind of giving you in between PS Plus Extra and Premium offerings while not having streaming. All of this is to be rolled out in Asia, then North America, and then other markets starting in June, with most territories aiming, in quotes, to have the service by the end of June. So I guess it's just launching in June. It's a weird way they worded that, I thought. Is this enough of an answer to Game Pass? Or more accurately, is it good enough to nullify Microsoft's Game Pass selling point? Well, we're just going to have to see. PlayStation Plus is, to be fair, an incredibly successful service with almost 50 million current subscribers. That's more than double the subscribers of Game Pass, and we don't know how many gold subscribers there even are. Microsoft has a lot of buzz, and Sony is definitely perceived to be behind in the services department by many in the press right now, but the numbers do not lie. Sony has a lot of PS Plus subscribers, far more than Game Pass, and it's starting to make sense why their answer seems to be to keep said subscribers from abandoning the service and upsell them on a more expensive version than really expand the user base. Whew. There's my write-up, Dan. I think it turned out well. But my gut reaction overall then is just kind of like meh. Not bad. It's just combining PS Now and PS Plus in a more sensical way than they had before. And I kind of just wish it was 2 tiers and they were more aggressive with what you get for the price. But not that much changes. It just makes more sense than what they had before. That's my take on it right now.
I do think there's an interesting take that as people that own PS5s, I think I kind of initially missed, unless there's something I'm wrong about. What they're doing is they're effectively keeping PS Plus the same with PS Plus Essentials, but they're effectively removing PS Now as an option you can buy a la carte which means
True.
people that stream from PC now basically need to buy PS Plus if they want to use it. So I think that's a pretty big knock against it.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's true. Which again makes me go, I wish the top tier is like $90. And they just folded some of the stuff to enhance the existing PS Plus. That would have came off as more competitive to me.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I guess they have the catalog of games that they're adding to PS Plus Extra, and so I think it's interesting. Unless this catalog in premium expands to 700 because of the PS Now offerings or something like that, it kind of just seems like the only thing I see that really gives you any benefit over what used to exist is the PS Plus Extra, where you get 400 titles that you can download. Which
we don't even know what games those are yet, so we don't even know.
Which I think that's what they're hoping will be able to compete with Game Pass, which, I mean, if that's what you buy, that it's effectively the same price as Game Pass for Xbox, I think. So,
well, if you pay full price, I think for Game Pass Ultimate, I believe the $120 is the same price.
Okay,
or is it still cheaper? Is it $15? I don't know. That's the thing, is I've never paid more than like $1, and I just cancel it after my free thing is done. So,
but yeah, so I think that's what they're trying to compete against Game Pass with, and they're just folding in PS Now with that. So I think you're effectively getting more value if you own a PS5, but you're kind of screwed over if you don't own a PlayStation and you just use the streaming service. So in my opinion, I think it's a kind of retrograde move in some ways
for those users. But I think if you look at the numbers, PS Now is again middling success. PS Plus is insanely successful. Their answer: let's upsell PS Plus subscribers because the PS Now ones really aren't making us much money. I think that's honestly what's going on.
Yeah, that probably is, and I think there's some value there in the PS Plus, the middle tier. But it would have been nice to see them just fold in all of that into one tier and price it at $90. But because effectively you've just combined PS Plus and PS Now and called it the same service.
Yeah, to me, it makes more sense. It's going to probably be enough to get any of the diehard PlayStation fans to choose this, maybe. But it doesn't seem like a direct counter to Game Pass yet. And they kind of openly say they're not going to.
Yeah, there's no day and date offerings of new games, at least as far as we can tell right now. And I don't see Sony offering that. No, at least not for the foreseeable future.
And I understand. They say it's unsustainable. And then you also look at how much money they're making off of how many... I didn't know they had that many concurrent PS Plus subscribers. Links are in the description, guys. I was like, 50 million, Jesus, or double Game Pass. All right, well, I see why they just want to upsell that. But at the same time, it's like, I understand then you can't justify financially giving away all these games for free, which I still have very big reservations about if Game Pass is at all sustainable. We're going to find out eventually. But what they could have done, what if they do this, Dan? What if they let you buy digital versions if you have the premium model for half off? Now, that would be interesting. But that type of then you get to keep it too. You know, so something like that. It feels like there's just a couple things that's missing. Something like that would have been cool. Like, isn't that a compromise they could have tried? I don't know.
Yeah, it would be cool to see. I mean, it would be interesting to see them try to more directly compete with it, but I think Sony's trying to hold the line for right now, and I'm not necessarily opposed to that at this point because I'm doubtful of the sustainability of Game Pass. And if both major competitors start doing that, move to a subscription model, well, we might just be left with both companies losing a ton of money and a ton of studio closures, which I don't want to see.
Yeah. Well, this is something I'm going to talk about in much more detail with the next guest, NX Gamer. So look forward, if you're a patron, to those Telegram requests to write in for our discussion points. But otherwise, I guess let's move on. Falto PS5 Series X owner writes in again. He says, hello, Tom and Dan. So it seems GT7 has always online DRM, even for single player. What are your thoughts on this? And is this something we just need to get used to in all games? I personally am not a fan of this, as offline solo play should have no need to be connected to online. And I find it very ironic that Sony, who made fun of Microsoft for almost having always online DRM Xbox One, is allowing a first-party game to do this. I have nothing to say except that it's stupid. It's stupid that, like, Origin, for example, makes me sign in to start a game. It's stupid that the Xbox Series X apparently makes you log in every 24 hours to play disc-based games, which makes absolutely no sense. You have a disc. It makes no sense that Sony's allowing GT7 to do this, and hopefully they'll patch it so it doesn't. Because this is so dumb, and I don't have much to say except that all of this DRM shit, especially when you at least have a disc involved, makes absolutely no sense. Do I accept it? No. And I try to avoid getting games with DRM. But at the same time, it's easy for me, let's just be honest, to avoid GT7. Probably wasn't going to buy it anyways ever. So I have no dog in this fight. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing else to add. Like, DRM is stupid. I think there's what they would say, well, you made fun of Microsoft 9 years ago when they did this. I think it's a slightly different situation because the world is just so much more connected to than it was 10 years ago. But I mean, I still think we should try to resist this as long as possible, because I don't know, this just leads to more vectors of of attack on your personal information, more reduced privacy. No, I just mean having everything always connected is a thing, I think, where it's easy to resign yourself to because it's just happening. But I just don't like having everything I have constantly having to be pinged online for no apparent reason. And it's just dumb. Hopefully there's a reversion from or rejection of this at some point.
I agree. Yeah, that's about all I've got to say about it. Is I don't like it. I don't like it when anyone does it. That's it.
Yeah.
All right, let us get to the final wrap up then, which is a very small one, but I did check last minute before we started recording. You know, I think we have more stories than usual, bigger stories than usual, so it makes sense that the wrap up's a little smaller. So these are the stories that don't deserve a full discussion but are worth mentioning. So I saw that Intel may be bringing back motherboards with integrated graphics on them. If you think about it, they used to allow Nvidia and AMD to do that, and then they all became competitors, and now we may just see some motherboards with built-in Xe graphics. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Too.
And then there was always this 170-watt Raphael Zen 4 CPU. Supposedly, it might be an insanely overclocked 16-core, according to Greymon now. Now, I was always told, in weird words, this is something different. But
okay,
like, were there, and that's made me go, is this the 32 Zen 4C model or Zen 4D model or something like that? But I don't know. I think it's worth mentioning that that's still floating around, that there's a 170 watt model and a 105 watt for 12 core, but that the 120 watt, which me and Xcube will fix verified was the plan for the top 16 core, seems to maybe be drying up, which to me would suggest AMD's going all out here, actually. We have TSMC 5 and 4 nanometer orders are explosive, with TSMC warning everybody that that they are going to have trouble keeping up with 5 and 4 nanometer demand. Again, interesting they mentioned 4 nanometer all of a sudden, and that 3 HPC customers have already pre-booked all 3 and 2 nanometer capacity. Also, you know, an honorable mention here, Nvidia Streamline. You know, I leaked some RTX 3090 Ti details like 12 hours before it came out. But I also, the first half of the video was about Nvidia Streamline, which I don't know if have you seen this, Dan?
Yeah.
So, from what I'm told, this just looks like RTX IO all over again. Something to try to make Nvidia look like they have an answer back then. And it's funny, I looked it up. If you go back,
I forgot about RTX IO.
If you go back though and read or watch like old Ampere Reveal stuff from that month in 2020, half of the shit is referencing the PS5. Like, I forgot how much they were like, no, we have SSD stuff. no, our 3060 laptop is this strong. It isn't. You know, like an RTX IO just really isn't out. And I've seen some people say, but no, now it's released. Yeah, in what game? It's not out. Now like clearly they invented this on the spot. They finished it now, and you're not going to be able to really use it in any game until Lovelace is out. And from what I'm told, that's what Nvidia Streamline is as well, is some attempt to look like they have the best version of like combining XE super sampling and FSR into their own software stack. But from what I've heard, no. And in fact, that like what they showed, like companies may have not signed off on, and it seemed very haphazard and thrown together.
I mean, yeah, like you point out in the video, it appears to be a PowerPoint slide.
Yeah. Also, Zen 4 might get double the L2 cache per core compared to Zen 3. Don't have much to say about that. Just again, more evidence of how they're getting to insanely higher IPC.
Yeah.
They've been showing a lot of slides lately that are just like more cache equals more IPC, I've noticed.
That meme from 2014, except now it's just more cache instead of more cores.
Yeah, AMD solution to scaling performance, and then just the googly eye guy pointing to more cache of cache. Yeah, it kind of is what's going on. All right. Let us then move on from this very brief wrap-up section to the final reader mails. Bullethead writes in, "Hey, Tom and Dan, or guest. It's Dan. And there's not a third guest yet, despite that one guy asking for it. How much of AMD's driver install update wonkiness might be due to bad default settings? I've noticed that sometimes my drivers will get messed up, and I think it might be caused by the check for update setting automatically trying to pull and install drivers in the background, even when it doesn't need to on Windows. I get why this behavior exists, because not all PC users are good at keeping their drivers up to date, but I wonder if AMD actually have the resources for proper testing on that functionality. I think it's something they're getting better at, but to answer your question, yeah, I think that's what it is half the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell you, especially when I had a bunch of mining rigs, half of the issues were some god dang Windows update that I told to not install. They just installed overnight and borked all my servers, mining rigs, and stuff in one night. I go, wait, why are my computers not working? Oh, there's probably a Windows update. You know, and I think that's a lot of it with AMD.
Yeah. That interplay is real fun.
I just
like
only Windows. Only Windows seems to break so many apps with an update. Every time. Enameled writes in, and he says, "Hi, guest." Well, it's Tom and Dan. He says, "Given the recent uptake of the Steam Deck, are you seeing a lot of time focusing on making games verified for the platform? Is it really as simple as Valve makes it out to be by a mere few lines of code?" I almost stumbled into oblivion there. I think he's referencing actually Brian Heemskirk, who was on recently. And what I would say is, from discussing this with Brian on the last Broken Silicon, it's more than a few lines of code. Just like FSR is more than a few lines of code. It does require, according to Brian, who's a developer, so like days or weeks to verify everything's good, making sure it's implemented properly. Yeah, no, it's more than just a few lines of code. I think it's very easy, you know, but I think it's more than that. Mr. Sideburns writes in, and he says, "Hi, Tom. In your RDNA 3 economics video, you mentioned that AMD have got MCM working and that it has something to do with cache." Yeah. Well, I mean, working in a way that makes sense to use. I think they always kind of had prototypes. It says, "Could this be the cache being the interconnect or a bridge between multiple dies? Could the cache be 3D stacked across multiple dies to connect them?" My answer is, you will see soon enough, my friend. But it might be more complex than people are expecting. I think a lot of early RDNA 3 leaks were just like, now there's 2 RDNA 2 dies. Woo. Like, real good source. No, I think it's more complicated than that, based on what I've seen. And in fact, just today I got some information they've already hinted at to you, Dan, of like, oh God, this could be way bigger than I thought. I just hope it's not too expensive. But you know, again, you know, depending on what the performance is, you just go, you know, well, maybe they'll justify it. QH Freddy writes in, "Does the custom, in quotes, AMD nodes at TSMC actually mean that node logic performance is any better? Aren't there other features that could be considered custom, maybe the MCM tweaks and such?" You know, that's a good point, QH. I haven't asked what is special about specific things that they say are custom. Like I've learned that the 6nm node for the 6500 XT is more custom than just N6, like that they can't just easily port between N7P, which is its own custom version of N7P they're actually using for RDNA 2. But I think it is a little bit of a performance thing. Like I think depending on how you define it, I think something to how they got RDNA 2 to clock so fast is custom tweaks they did to the node to allow that to happen. But outside of that, I really haven't asked enough to give you a better answer, but that is a good thing for me to start thinking about is, you know, like how much of the custom node is just them working on ways of making it work well with Vcache or 3D stacking. You know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But, all right, Dan, we somehow managed to do it. We have an episode that is below 2 hours despite the insane news this week. But it's interesting. There's a lot less little things to talk about outside of the mega stories. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that does it.
I think that just about does it, partner. Well, I reckon that about does it for the episode. So, well, thank y'all for listening. And, you know, remember that we have a Patreon. We can't do this without our patrons. You'll get this early and ad-free if you support us on Patreon. Ask me and the guest questions. You can talk about this on the Discord after it comes out with me and the entire community. There's tons of other resources out there for you if you support us. We can't do this without our patrons. And, you know, tell your friends about us. Subscribe to Broken Silicon in a podcast app of your choosing. And please give us a review that boosts our ratings for, like, you know, specifically Apple Podcasts, which I know got us some notoriety outside of YouTube a couple of years ago, and we like rose to, I believe, the top 20 tech podcasts in the US, which was crazy. You know, like every time that happens, it's like people who don't necessarily watch a lot of YouTube go, oh, what's this technology podcast being recommended to me? So see if you can support us there. Otherwise, I'm tired. Need to go to sleep. Another delayed episode. We're planning the next episode to actually come out at the correct time, which is Tuesday. Hope I didn't just jinx us. That's the plan. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Mellon, Anthony Gareffa, Dale Russell, Jeremy Scallon, Loophole 35, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Alquari, Eric Osborne, Jeff Sedler, Andre Jacques, Sarcastro, Terrence Harrod, Drita Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, Jackson A. Miller, Jesse Jaskowiak, Josh Law, Brandon, Travis Gooding, The Mechanical Philosopher, Gaiman Since Reagan, Fatboy Distro, Daniel Hyde, A Guy in PA81, Nathan Mose, Cole Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, F7GOS, Matthew Landavazo, My Name is Nobody, Judson N. Lethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchik, Rontaro Matsukata, John Jameson, Sam Venzel, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, Jan Rounder, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Meyer Techrance, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Groh, 3DS Boy 08, Dominique Cox, Stefan, Original Ross, Sandy Garrido Saunderson, Joaquin Hagan, Teak Autumn Soul Connor, Michael Casa, Delmaine Peterson, Z Jits, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Acker, Haxapuma, Tom Sanfilippo, Justice Brennan, Zutsu Taylor, Trevor Powstu, Lenya Nanya, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederick, Dane Galanowski, Ian Clifford, Axel Cisneros, Leighton Perry, Joseph Kerriman, Brett Summers, Blake, Donovan Russell, Noah Nicoella, Zucki, Matt Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Hulan, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Gillis Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Brucha, Jeremy So, Mitchell Pell, Silvanos, Eddie Del Castillo, Jacob Lasser, Luis Correa, Deke, Chris P. Erbakken, Tyler Lindley, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Riggleman, Justin Gower, Caillou Markelli, Dave McCoy, Valco Malek, Gabe Leonard, Ronnie, DNA Tech, Michael Deaton, MJV1, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Chrysantine, Mai Sharona, Y Truly, Roman, William W. Draper, Air Rats, Spam G. Spamton, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Spray Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amiable Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Sammy Malas, James Anderson, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, RP Sharma, Mead and Pork, Jimmy MG, Mads, Matthew Lazier, Benjamin Oshley, Mark Mitchell, Shield TV, Kuto, Aaron, John with Sink, Mohammed, Jean DeBont, Pulse Media, Sean Ashmont, Daniel Dewars, Stephen Zhang, JSMMH, Georgie Kastedanov, PCBs 22, Reginald Ari, Norethio, Ivan, Charles Russell, Hal Buma, Adarsh Aditya, The Grid, Andrew S., Chris Rich, Powell, Zigartowski, Desist, Zabbeat03, and thank you to Sahara for the music.